Chapter 4. Who is he? Diego said. On a Saturday morning, Isaac visited Helen's museum. He dropped some money in a donation box and entered a spacious display room where only one visitor was in, an old lady watching a large painting mounted on the wall. Isaac knew very little about art but was enchanted to see a painting about a farming village in the Middle Age of Europe. As he appreciated the details of the painting, a faint voice coming from an adjacent room caught his attention. He walked through the passageway to the other room and saw a man staring at a woman with a graceful expression, asking her the history of a painting on the wall. As the woman spoke, Isaac immediately recognized her as Helen. The man looked at Helen with an intimate eye emotion that one could find when a man stares at his lover. Neither of them noticed Isaac standing there watching. Isaac did not want to interrupt them, so he went out and meditated under a tree for hours, and was awakened by joyful waves of laughter. He stood up and saw Helen and the man stepping out of the museum. He smiled and nodded at Helen. Confused and astonished, Helen stood still as if awakened from a dream. Isaac, she exclaimed. Hi, Helen. He greeted her. She rushed toward him, leaving the man behind, and they hugged each other genuinely. Where's your backpack? She asked. In a storage room. She laughed. What brings you to Santa Barbara? A mission. Helen pursed her lips. I thought you came here to visit me. Embarrassed, Isaac smiled. My mission is to see you. She smiled sweetly. You have not forgotten me? Of course not. I came here to apologize for my abrupt leave last time, and thank you for keeping the USB drive. Helen mocked an unpleasant expression and kidded. I was so angry you left me without saying goodbye. I've taken good care of your drive. How do you thank me? Feeling embarrassed, he said, I am sorry. Helen smiled sweetly. I was kidding. Don't take it seriously. To thank you, I'll teach you one badminton stroke. Helen felt excited. Seriously? Sure, but not today. I certainly will come back to teach you on some other day. Helen jumped and clapped her hands. Hooray! Isaac stole an eye on the man, who was standing near the museum entrance. He stared at Isaac jealously. Helen waved to him, and he came forward gracefully. This is Martin. We knew each other when I worked in Northern California. Martin is a successful entrepreneur, but has retired at a young age. He traveled to Nepal and had just returned, Helen said diplomatically. Martin was remarkably handsome, his body middle-sized built upon graceful and active lines. His face was light, a typical Caucasian, with prudent eyes that reflect the wisdom and knowledge of an intelligent scholar, which could arouse a lot of fascinations for girls. His features were pleasing and regular, save only his straight thin lips. His voice was engaging and his manner graceful. With a friendly warm smile, Martin shook hands with Isaac. Helen mentioned to me about your adventures. You are her hero, Martin said respectfully. Isaac felt embarrassed again. Actually, I am a homeless wandering around. Diego paused as he thought of something. Remarkable, Varshi said, smiling. Madam, Isaac seemed to be shy and reserved in telling me this part, and many things are not clearly told. My own feeling is that Helen likes him more than she likes Martin. Varshi smiled. I see. Then fill in the gaps of what he told you with your own interpretation. I believe you know him well enough to interpret correctly. You can tell the story in a dramatic way as long as the main theme is true. Okay. As it goes, Helen told Martin to wait for them in the park. She and Isaac went to her office on the second floor, where they had a lengthy conversation. Helen returned the USB drive to him, but he did not tell me the details. When they came down, Martin had been waiting impatiently, pacing around the park, but upon seeing them, Martin behaved like a true gentleman, smiling warmly. He took them to a nearby elegant cafeteria, and had a long chat. As time proceeded, Isaac felt the gloomy and jealousy countenance of Martin, which made him uncomfortable. Isaac may not be any intellectual, but he is not a dumb person, so he hinted that he was engaged. Martin's eyes brightened, while Helen was astonished. It seemed that Martin was more interested in Isaac's fiancée than Isaac himself. I bet she is a beautiful fair lady, he said friendly. Yes, indeed, she is. Her name? Pearl. Please send my regards to her. I will, thanks. Where is she now? In Awesome Nation. What? Martin seemed to be confused. People also call it Strong Nation and their people strongest. Martin suddenly understood and laughed. I see. Is she working? No. Still going to school? Isaac smiled bitterly. No, she is in jail. The answer shocked both Martin and Helen. Why? Helen asked friendly and warily. Helping a dissident who fought for basic human rights to escape from custody. Will she be released soon? Helen asked. 8 more years. Everyone fell silent. Isaac was the first one to resume the conversation. That night, after the dissident had escaped, I was at her home. An intruder entered her house in darkness and received a fatal kick from me. Outside the house, 2 thugs tried to attack me, only that I gave the first one a fatal strike, which stopped the other thug from further attack. They retreated. Then we realized that they were local policemen, who came to arrest Pearl for her involvement in helping the dissident escape. They certainly would take revenge, and put me in jail for many years, and would torture me. So, I became a fugitive and escaped to Hong Kong, then to America. Pearl was arrested and put in jail. And you were waiting for her? Asked Helen curiously. Yes, Isaac reassured. As Isaac talked more about Pearl, Martin suddenly said, maybe I could help you to get her out. This time, both Helen and Isaac were shocked. Martin presented his plan of rescuing Pearl, and both Helen and Isaac felt that it was feasible. His eyes became moist and red as he learned of Martin's amiable offer, and he also understood how much Martin loved Helen. They spent hours working out the rescue plan, but Isaac did not tell me the details of it, as they had agreed to keep it secret. What did he do after the trip? He didn't say much. But when he came here, I once drove him to a cemetery, which was about 100 miles north of here. He laid flowers on a tomb, and bowed to it. I saw at a distance a photo of a Caucasian man mounted at the tomb. He did not tell, and I did not ask. Varshi smiled warmly. Diego, thank you so much for telling me his fantastic adventures. I am looking forward to meeting him sometime in the near future. Have a good day. My pleasure, madam, Diego said and left her room. A week passed, and Varshi had worked diligently on her program development, forgetting the drama of Folk and Isaac. One morning, when she was working in her office, Jacobs came. As usual, she brewed a large pot of coffee for him. Sitting opposite her, he leaned back with an impassive expression, sipped coffee, and waited for Varshi to speak first. The thought reconstruction program is in its final testing stage. Preliminary results are encouraging, Varshi said with a tone of triumph. Excellent, Jacob said and began to show signs of emotion. Surprisingly, he did not ask further questions about it, as if he fully trusted Varshi and her ability in developing AI applications. He stood up, holding his cup of coffee, and began to pace her office. He looked at a flower bed outside through a glass window, at which the blind had been lifted. Did you read the news about Folk's reappearance? Jacobs asked. Yes, I watched the video of his news conference. He got lost in the park, and wandered around for 2 weeks. He called the hotel the second day. I suppose the hotel would inform the police to cancel the search. It is not any big news. I might have imagined too much, and it might be a mistake to inform you about this minor case, to distract you from other more important issues. Varshi, by fate or by luck, you might have brought our attention to a very extraordinary conspiracy, he said in high glee, fetching more coffee from the pot. Varshi stared at him with surprise. I don't understand. Folk lied. Jacobs answered firmly. Folk didn't call the hotel? Yes, he did. That might be the only truth he presented at the news conference. All others were lies. Astonished, she asked, "Lies? How could you tell?" "What he said are consistent with the descriptions of Harold, the detective." Jacob sat back on his chair. "We have connections with the FBI and the National Police. After receiving your tips, we contacted the local police. What they told us was peculiar." Varshi was confused and strained her eyes. "They did not find Folk. Did they?" Jacob shook his head. "No, they didn't." After resting at the food truck, Harold resumed his chase. The man and the dog ran on sidewalks, which were illuminated by lampposts. The dog guided him to other parks and exit again. Eventually, he reached a bike pedestrian lane, which first went east and then turned south. Lockheed sniffed without any confusion, and ran on the lane, which sometimes passed through bushes and mini woods. Under the dim light, Harold still could sometimes see footprints left by Folk as the soil of the lane was moist. Varshi interrupted. Eventually, Folk had to rest and go to a restaurant to eat. Harold could ask the waiters there if they saw such a person. Jacob said, "That's what Harold thought too." The weirdest thing was that the trace path of Folk was always on the lane, save one instance he veered off to a men's room. Not only that it did not veer off to any restaurant, but it did not even veer off to any resting area, that is benches and tables for people to rest. Ironically, 3 times Harold veered off to eat and rest. Varshi said, "That does not make sense. Folk could not run for hours and hours without eating and resting." Jacob said he could have brought some energy bars, and got water from the water fountains along the way. We did not know how the runner felt, but it was an exhausting evening for Harold, who ran from one town to another, crossing parks and rivers. Folk's footprints never ended. When night fully commenced, he retreated. Now the police realized Folk was not lost in the mountains, and they received information from the hotel, saying that Folk had called, and he would be away for 2 weeks. The police could have closed the case and stopped the trace. However, the team, in particular Harold, wanted to find out where Folk had gone. They were given 1 more day to do the search. The next morning, they decided to make a fast search. Besides Lockheed, they brought 1 more dog to perform a look-ahead tracing. All 2 dogs searched in parallel? Yes, Harold started searching from the location it stopped yesterday, but his colleague, George, drove south on Freeway 5 and identified Folk's footprints 50 miles ahead on the lane, and started searching there. 2 men and 2 dogs were running on the lane to search for Folk at the same time, only that they could not get to any destination when night came, and Folk never veered off to any restaurant or hotel. That means in less than 3 days, Folk had run about 300 miles without rest. Varshi sat straight, staring at Jacobs with a bewildered expression. This is singular. It's impossible that Folk ran for more than 2 days without stop and sleep. Did they resume the search the next day? No, unremitting heavy rain that lasted for the whole night erased all the footprints, and masked the scent. So, the search was inconclusive. Since Folk had called, the police closed the case. If it were not because of your tips, no one would look further into it. I must thank you for calling my attention to this case, which would otherwise be buried forever. We might have unconsciously stumbled upon a critical conspiracy. So in the news conference, Folk lied that he was wandering around. In fact, he was running and running fast. Jacobs ignored her comment. We have another crucial discovery. From the images of the footprints Harold and George recorded, we reconstructed the runner's posture and stride. We noticed that the front of the footprint was significantly deeper than normal. This means the runner was shouldering a load such as a backpack. Varshi frowned. The mystery deepened. If Folk carried a backpack, Harold and later George could have easily caught up with him. Analysis of the images confirms that the footprints were traced out by the same runner all the way. Yet, more amazing was that the strides were almost always constant. That means the runner had been running at a nearly constant speed in 2 days. Jacobs paused and stared at Varshi. She fell silent for some time. The takeaway seems clear. The runner could not be Folk. Someone had worn his shoes to run along. She said thoughtfully. We are sure that's what had happened. We learned that Folk is pretty good at long-distance running, but the endurance of the runner was shocking. Even Harold in his prime did not come close to that level. There are some ultramarathon runners in this world who can run 3 days non-stop, but only 3 known runners on this planet could run at such a pace. Harold knows all 3 of them, and he was sure that they were not in Southern California at that time. We secretly checked and confirmed his claim. Varshi said, if this surmise is correct, there are 3 questions at the outset. The first one is whether Folk had conspired with the shadow runner to deceive the police. The second is whether he had been kidnapped by a gang or a mysterious organization. The third is why Folk lied. Jacobs nodded. Also, who is the shadow runner? Varshi, could the runner be a robot? Varshi shook her head. No way. Robotic technologies are still far from the point of creating a robot that could run in a mountainous trail. You might have seen in videos or exhibitions robots running on stairs fluently, or navigating through obstacles smoothly. Those are actually demos and performed indoors. Such a robot has 1 or more scanners mounted on it, and designers put barcodes at various places of the room for it to scan. The codes guide it to move. His countenance brightened. I see. Then we can conclude that there's a 4th person, presumably a man, on this planet, who could do so. He is a mysterious unknown, shadowing Folk to run the trail. He said and asked, almost like talking to himself. Who is he? Varshi nodded and thought for a moment. In northern Mexico, over the remote, huge, rugged mountains, live a little-known native Indian tribe named Tarahumara, meaning fast runners. This elusive and indigenous tribe is shrouded in mystery, living in the same lifestyles they did centuries ago. It was reported that they could run over 400 miles in just over 2 days. It was very unlikely that the runner was a Tarahumara. Serious Tarahumaras runners wear sandals, or are barefoot when they run. Also, they are of a smaller size. Let's put aside the question of who, the real identity of the runner. More urgent, we want to address the question of why. What is the intention of doing all these insane running and disappearance? Varshi laid back, staring blankly at her desk. She buried herself in thought. She knew that Jacobs might have conclusions already. When she looked up, she tried her best to answer. I see no connection between Folk and the mysterious runner. He gained nothing by asking a runner to impersonate him and to deceive the police, and then lied about it. There must be a purpose for this extraordinary endeavor. The fact that Folk conspired with a singular top runner to impersonate him does not come together. I believe he was kidnapped, and forced to change his shoes at some point. A mysterious runner wore his shoes to run the trails to deceive the police. While the police were busy chasing after the shadow runner, the kidnappers safely took off to their destined location, and from the weather forecast, they knew that it was going to rain in a couple of days. The runner continued to run until it rained, which erased all the footprints and scent. So, the police would never know where the runner had gone. The kidnappers later coerced Folk to lie about his disappearance. My first thought was that Folk has some important medical discovery or an invention, which is very valuable. The kidnappers came for those items or they sought vengeance against him. Another possibility is that Folk had the intention to deflect, and was discovered by spies from Strong Nation, another popular name for Awesome Nation, who then kidnapped him. However, Folk did not look particularly nervous or depressed at the news conference. I had seen coerced criminal confessions in front of the TV in Awesome Nation. The confessors looked very miserable and depressed. Folk did not appear anything close to them. So, I believe he did not receive any life-threatening threats. A more reasonable surmise is that he might involve in some very bad scandal, and his reputation will be demolished if it is exposed to the public. The kidnappers got hold of this scandal, and coerced him to cooperate. He is a top scientist in Strong Nation. There might be some information that the kidnappers wanted to extract from him. They reached the deal with the provision that Folk spoke in the public according to their narratives. Super. Jacob said, that's our conclusions too. Folk might be a spy. The government of Awesome Nation has coerced many scientists to spy for them. Does the FBI know about that? Not yet, but they will be awakened soon, in 1 or 2 years. Awesome Nation makes use of the trade surplus with us to hire many lobbyists in this country to say good words about them. Their advertising or propaganda money is everywhere, and many of our news media depend on their money to thrive. I'll continue to investigate and come back in a week or so. He made an appointment to meet Vashi again a week later. After Jacobs left, she thought of Isaac.